So POS. We need POS to give us an idea of how effective our searches were. I put out 2 videos on this because after that whole 21% came around, they said, Chief, you got to put out some videos. I said, all right. So
where are those videos?
So they're on the Coast Guard or on SAR Schools portal. Yeah, so they're on there. There's 2 of them. One is just how to read a report, and the other is how to understand a report. But honestly, those are just the beginning. I want to get hopefully another one done before I get out. We'll see. So why do I have to have people watch these 3 to 5 times to understand them? Because it's not going to be readily understood right at the very beginning. The first couple times you watch it, you're going to go, okay, I get it. And then I break you out and have you look at it again, and you go, I don't know, I thought I understood it, I don't really get it. You go back and watch it again, pay attention to certain things that you're looking for again. So majority of people I've talked to said they've got to watch it anywhere from 3 to 5 times to really kind of understand what we're talking about. So if you're watching it once and you go, I get it, you think you might have gotten it, but you probably need to watch it again because it's really kind of complicated. POS has 3 reports. A lot of people don't realize there's 3 reports. So when I ask the majority of people which report you're even using, most people are using the planner POS report, which isn't for SMCs, it's actually for the OU. And so when I explain to you, like, that's not the one you want to be using, you're going to go, well, why does it matter? And I go, well, it's the fundamental understanding of why there's 3 reports. So I'm going to explain to you, there's 3 reports and why those 3 reports are important. And how do I use this? Well, the answer on back to how to use this information was that understanding and implementing this information is really, what you're telling me is if you go, I don't really care about any of this, Chief. I go, well then don't use SAR-Ops. Just draw it on a chart and call it a day. Because SAR-Ops is maximizing POS. That's all it's doing, is maximizing POS. And so for you to turn around and say, I don't care about that number, or it's not important to me, well then why in the hell are you even using SAR-Ops? You gotta understand how it's working, otherwise it doesn't really do anything for you. It's a great tool if you understand what it's doing. But I'm gonna show you there's an Achilles heel to this whole thing.
Is it a fair assumption to say if you don't agree with what it's telling you, you're using the wrong scenario or thinking about it incorrectly?
I think that yes, you need to have somebody else look at it because sometimes we get too close to it. We get funneled in on a linear way of thinking of something. We might need to open up and say, look at this, let's see what you think of this. Like turn on the pre-distress motion, show how it's all moving. I'm showing the boat going through here and it's going there. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, see what everybody thinks of that. And then make sure as you're briefing out some of these numbers, you're gonna need to know what we're talking about. I'm gonna show you as we break it down. But yeah, I would say that it needs to accurately reflect what you think, but think of that as the one scenario. Be open to the idea of another scenario that also could encompass for those possibilities. Oh, and then do I even need this? Yeah, because we have to have this information in order to determine how effective some of our searches are. Believe it or not, the manual method of doing searches, the way that we used to do it back with charts, is actually almost as effective. They've shown it's pretty close to as effective as SAR-Ops is on alpha. So on alpha, there's really not a big difference between doing the old manual method and doing SAR-Ops. Bravo's, Charlie's, Deltas, SAR-Ops will absolutely better. As long as you understand what you're doing with it. And that's key. All right. Does everybody have this on their board? If it's on your board, you should get rid of it. It doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. It's like everybody's old school favorite. What's the equation for POS? POC times POD. All right, good. No, it's actually not correct. 1 minus P fill.
1 minus P fill.
Okay. So I have this in my video. It goes into more depth. I didn't want to go too far into the video because again, you can all go watch the video if you want to. But it's calculating a P fill on all 5,000 particles and determining as it moves through the SRU and as the particles move. So as that particle's moving, as the SRU is moving, it's determining the closest point of approach to that particle and determining its probability of detecting that particle and then reducing the P fill on that specific particle. But it's doing that for all the particles. And so this is what I mean by it's a much more dynamic way of telling you, yeah, we definitely would have seen it. So if any of these guys right along the track, it'll go, yeah, we definitely should have seen those. But all these guys on the outsides, maybe we haven't seen those yet. And that's what it's doing. So we're going to talk about reading those between conditionals, joints, weights, all that. I'll get into that in a minute. So how do we measure the search effectiveness? Do you think POS is an accurate measure for search effectiveness? How many people think it should be coverage instead, or it should be POS, or what are some of the metrics we're determining to figure out how effective something is? I would argue that POS is going to be more effective if it's accurate. If you got all the information correct, it is accurate, going to be more effective than necessarily just saying it based off a certain coverage factor or something else. Because a coverage factor is something that's a static number. Coverage factor, so the corrected sweep width against the track, and looking at the coverage factor is going to tell you how effective it is, but that's not telling you based on how the visibility changes, or how the sea state changes, or how that's going to be affected towards each of the different possibilities into the different particles, because that coverage factor is only for one object, not all the objects. So I ask this in every one of my classes because I want to make sure everybody's paying attention. Does anybody know what this is? What's the goal of search planning?
Find the object you're searching for.
Find what you're searching for? Yeah? What if I told you you're half right?
In the area that you plan.
Ooh, yeah, that could be good. We're still only half right. It's to find them as quickly as possible. Not just find them, but find them in the smallest amount of time possible. Would you be shocked to know that StarOps doesn't care about time? Because it was designed to create the highest probability of success, not do it in the shortest amount of time. You, as the planner, have to determine how to do that with the shortest amount of time, which is why we're having this conversation. Because I'm going to show you that if you brief out to your SMC, hey, we're getting a POS at 95%, you go, great, sounds great, call me when you find them, then you're not doing it right. Because if I had to brief this out and say, hey, our POS is 95% 6 hours from now, and you go 6 hours from now, it seems a long time. What is it after 2 hours? Well, hold on. Well, if you'd have done a 2-hour sortie, you'd have gotten a POS of 80. Ooh, would you all rather get an 80% chance of getting you out of the water in 2 hours, or do you want me to wait 5 hours or 6 hours to get you out of the water? Yeah. So, what that means is the highest amount of POS in the shortest amount of time. It's also referred to as a probable success rate, because it's POS divided by time. So you want the highest POS in the shortest amount of time. So what we're trying to do is the most bang for our buck, right? So what that means is we want to search the highest density, the most problematic or the most probable area. Search that first. The StarOps won't do that for you. Another question for you, especially with you all in the cold water, when's your best chance of finding them? What epic? Alpha?
Best chance to find them alive.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean, find them alive. Because we're trying to find survivors. It's a key part. So if that's the case, then what should be your primary search object in Alpha then? Some people will still say the larger object. It could also be the PIW, depending on which way you're going. My point is, I want you all to be considering the PIW in Alpha immediately. The ALCOS is going to push this idea, and a lot of people are immediately against it. But if you think about it, if the drift interval is small, finding and doing a search that's conducive for the smallest object will help you find the larger object.
Not
So-
the quickest time.
Yeah, not the quickest.
Correct, not in the quickest time, but I'm going to show you how to use time to help you. Right?
So that'd be a fundamental change for us right there.
Yes. And that's a fundamental change for the entire field.
Yeah.
It's not just us. So I'm going to show you how we're going to kind of do that. Why this is important is because the OU makes decisions sometimes on a quick search plan being the most advantageous. But StarOps, if given the total time, does something different. And I've seen so many controllers that go, well, I like that better. Now that StarOps is put out and I see the POS on this is so high, they'll go, yeah, I like it. Let's go ahead and go with that. Well, why didn't we do what you said? You just let the system just beat your thinking for whatever reason, and there's probably not true. You might have said, hey, we got a report that they're over here, let's go out here and hit it with a Victor Sierra, and then all of a sudden you put in your 4 hours or 2 hours of endurance, and it on StarOps give you something else, and you go, yeah, okay, I'm okay with that. But your Victor Sierra in just 10 minutes might have had an adequate chance of finding them. So you've got to account for those possibilities. StarOps isn't thinking it that way. It can't. So what really was happening was that people were doing this and putting it in externally. Let's say you knew you were gonna do a Victor Sierra, and you plan on doing a Victor Sierra, well, you'd put it in, and then you wouldn't know what the POS was on an external pattern, because it gets put in, and it has to then take place after the sim-in time. So that sim-in had to account for it, and you had to review it, but you planned it. So it's something as simple as this. If you plan a search, I want it in the planner. If your SURU does something different than that, external to you, that's external. Simple. Can SAROps optimize Victor Sierras? Yes. Latest SMEF advisory, absolutely can now. So it'll actually, you can create the Victor Sierra for it and hit optimize, and it'll put it in the most advantageous spot for the Victor Sierra. And tell you the POS on it. Right out of the gate. And so you used a whopping 10 minutes now, and you can start to look at this. You can import the patterns, and everybody know where I'm talking about on the reviews, on the review for a drift. You'll have a review part where you can bring in all your externals, or you can even create. I don't want you using externals unless it's something that you know took place outside of your plan. OGAs did something, or your SRU did something prior to getting tasking, then it should go in there.
So if they do something because SAROps is taking so long to generate the plan, would you still put it in as an external, or just work that into your plan when you get it?
You could work it into your plan if they haven't done it yet. If they've already done it and it's already like been accounted for, I don't know how you'd be able to do that and review it, because I still want to talk to the pilots and ask them, like, was their visibility correct, were their speeds correct, all of that fun stuff.
Was their initial light the same as what SAROps gave you?
Yeah, I mean, all of that. So I don't know if I want to spend the time on doing that with them to do it. So I would probably say just build it into my planner and hope for the best, I guess, in that regard. But what I'm finding is that the reason why it's taking so long is because we get hung up on some values that we think are important in the simulator when they weren't. So as I try to get you to go faster through the simulator to realize where your key assumptions are on those scenarios and build them in. Instead of fighting for this with the scenario, why not just go ahead and say, hey, I'm gonna build in the worst case scenario, and you just do that, and then build in the best case scenario, and then do that, and move on. But instead we try to fight to create the scenario. Well, I think this is what took place. And we end up with this long dialogue into this is what the scenario is. What if I can tell you don't have to do all your tasking at once? I just need the first hour. And I can do the first hour before their asset ever gets off the deck. Well, then that makes it easy, right? I can come up with a plan pretty quickly.
Yeah, I guess translating that to the field to Johnny OS2 or Jane OS2 with minimal training
Yes.
makes it a lot more difficult.
So what I've found from the majority of training officers who've come through MSP2 is that they realize that their training is not robust enough. You are creating scenarios that are based off of simplistic scenarios, the scenario, and you're doing the whole gotcha moments of, you didn't catch this 10-minute time difference. That's a stupid thing to hit them on. That wasn't even what you should have been focusing on. And instead, what we need to be doing is getting into the idea of the scenario and multiple possibilities. Get into the idea of what we talked about in MSP2, which is the idea of good, better, best. Like, this is good, but here's a better way to do that. Or here's the best way you should be doing that. And teach them that way. And to realize, like, okay, hit those criteria. But really where you need to be spending just as much time in your simulation is your planner. Majority of people are just going optimize finish, and they're just sticking to that. And that is not the way to do this. To make SAROps do what you're going to need to do, you're going to have to play with the planner. So as much time as you spend in the simulator is as much time as I would want you in the planner. I would want you to create initial drifts or initial plans, or hey, put in that external pattern like you're saying, evaluate that, tell me how effective it was for the cuddy cabin. All those different things, those types of trainings are more effective to what you're wanting to do. All right, let me get to this. So, if I'd asked you to do splits, if I wanted you to come up with a couple different Victor Sierras and a couple parallels, some people will do this as individual SRUs. They'll create 4 versions of 6012 and then offset all their commence times to make it happen that way. For the system, this will still work. You just have to tell it to allow overlap because it doesn't realize these are the same SRU. You also could end up completely screwing up these times and completely screwing up their on-scene time. So, because if you mess up one of them, it'll affect, it won't affect the next one, but then you're gonna have 2 of them searching at the same time. So you have to be careful with this because you can do it this way. This is not the way that it was designed to be used. So if you find yourself doing this, I want you to start learning how to split. Splitting is where you have to start. You have to get comfortable with splitting. This is how you do that same thing through splits. So we got alpha 1, 2, 3, and then 4 is turned off. Splits will increase your POS per hour because they're going to give you more flexibility than a single plan, than a single pattern ever will. I'm going to show you what I mean by that.
You have a time frame typically on splits? You use
Depends
a
on how much
2-hour
effort I
rule?
want to use. You mean, like for as total, like total time period or the individual time period?
You have a 4-hour search split into 2 twos?
It depends on what I want to do initially. So if I'm doing a trackline single return on an LOB, it could take me like a half hour, 45 minutes to do that initially. But if I want to do 2 Victor Sierras on a last known position, that's only 9 minutes each. So it depends, but good question. And I would tell you that knowing how much to split, I do that more based off of coverage factors at that point. Because coverage and time are in correlation to each other. Hopefully I'll go over that. As you can see, I have a whole bunch of stuff I want to go over. We don't have a whole lot of time. All right. So if I give you an LOB, right? This was a LOB, it's approximately 25 miles. And I tossed down a 60. I realize you all don't get to play with 60s. I'm sorry. You got still 60s?
Traverse City.
Oh, that's right, Traverse City's got it now, right? It was 65s for the longest time, right?
2 years ago, 2 or 3.
Good. All right. So you throw out a 60 for 3 hours on an LOB. And I tell it cuddy cabin. This is what the fleet was doing. But they were only drifting cuddy cabin. Does that sound right for anybody? Because what I was seeing was Encore, cuddy cabin only, drift.
No confirmed PIW?
No, nothing. We don't have anything else. We just got Mayday. We got the Mayday radio check. Mayday, Mayday. Boop, nothing. But if I toss a 60 at this for 3 hours and I tell it optimize go, SAROPS will create this. And you'll get a POS if I read this. This, since it's only a single pattern, will be the same as down here. If this was multiple patterns, this is always going to be the summation of everything above it. And in an alpha, this is the same as your external because it's what you planned. It's only in Bravos, Charlies, and Deltas that this number will be completely different than your external numbers. Because this is always on what's left. When you haven't done any searches, what's left is everything. But when you do an alpha and you, let's say you remove 70% of the particles, then you're searching for the remaining 30. You're not searching for what you already looked for. So these numbers, I'll show you that as we go forward. But like I said, hopefully you guys get a chance to watch some of the videos that'll explain all of that for you. But it creates this thing. And I go, so what's our POS? So how many people were briefing a joint if they had it? Or were you briefing a conditional? Because if you were the person who only drifted the cuddy cabin, then the numbers would be identical. But because I put 4 objects here, this number changed to become the average of all 4. Why this is important is because one OU drifts only the cuddy cabin, their POS is 98. The other OU drifts all 4, they turn around and say their POS is 73. But that's not true. It's 98 for the cuddy cabin, nothing's changed. Same POS for the same things, but you have to be clear on which one you're briefing. That's why conditionals became the most important number and metric to be briefing. But what we were finding is that not everybody knew where to find the conditional POS, which meant that people were briefing the joint number. Again, the joint up here exists only for that pattern. When you have multiple patterns, it'll be the combination of all the patterns, not just the single. And since I only optimized on only the cuddy cabin, SAROPS said, maximize this number. You have 3 hours to search on a cuddy cabin, go. Maximize only the cuddy cabin. So the search for just the cuddy cabin was identical to the person who only drifted the cuddy cabin because I told SAROPS that's the only number I cared about. So it did that. But that's terrible. Look at your first couple legs. It's commencing to the south of the LOB down here. There's your first couple legs. So the first hour isn't even into the LOB. And you go, well, why did it do that? Well, because the drift is pushing south, so SAROPS is catching all those cuddy cabins before they get out. You told it, get the highest number on the cuddy cabins in 3 hours, and it did. There you go, but that's terrible. I go, yeah. So what if I tell SAROPS, how long does it take to do the down and back? If I do the math, and I go back and I go, okay, it's approximately, I think it's like 25 miles. Down and back, maybe call it 50. Round it off, it's close to a half hour, roughly, right? So I can round it up, give it a little bit more time if I need to. But if I tell SAROPS, hey, I'm only gonna give you 30 minutes. If I tell SAROPS, I'm only gonna give you 30 minutes and everything else is off, it will create a two-legged parallel right down that elevator, all on its own. And you go, well, then Sarge, why didn't you do that for me? And he goes, well, you didn't tell me I had 30 minutes. You told me I had one pattern, it took 3 hours. So when I do this, I turn off everything else, I say, hey, optimize on this. It goes, well, here you go. And now my cutting cabin's POS is 75% in the first 30 minutes. That should change things for you as a planner, that would change things for me as an SOC. Hey, I'm gonna do it down and back on the LOB, optimized on the cutting cabin, the POS on that 75%. Based on that information, I'm gonna take the remaining time and go ahead and look for the possibility, the worst case possibility, the people in the water or even the small capsize boat. Why would I continue to look for the cutting cabin for another 2.5 hours? Doesn't make sense. And if you were to change this to PIW, all it would do is it'd bring in that track spacing. And when you bring in that track spacing and make a nice tight little track between there, if you do that tight track spacing there on the PIW, you're gonna find that your cuddy cabin trade-off wasn't too much. So what if I told you that your cuddy cabin dropped to a whopping 70%, but it still was a much tighter track spacing on the possibility of the PIW? Still a decent trade-off.
We do look at that.
So,
Good.
I've had this exact case,
Okay.
and, so if you go back, you were at what, 98%?
Uh-huh.
I told the sector, no offense to any secretary, I told them, okay, you guys are at like 98%, but you're using our SRU, you're using our 60 for like 2 hours, and you know, we really don't need to saturate the area for 2 hours, maybe shorten it, so we're just running through up and back.
Yeah.
So they said, well, that dropped us to like 90 something, so we don't wanna do that, we're gonna run them for the whole 3 hours.
Yes. Now I'm wondering.
Now here at the district, our thing is, well, are they in policy?
Mhm.
Technically, yes. Is it the best use of the asset? Not in our opinion.
Right.
So what do we do?
So I would tell you that the argument was correct, but it was fundamentally different in the fact that if you just said your POS could be higher in a shorter amount of time. That's
All they
their
see
effort
is that it
allocation.
drops.
I know, and that's all they do see. But I'm wanting to explain to you, this is how this has to get trained. We want the highest POS in the shortest amount of time.
Right.
Changing that effort allocation into something much smaller would increase the POS much quicker in a very short amount of time. But that's where we have to increase the training. So I'm not disagreeing, and there's no way that I could turn around and say, well, this is how you do it. As much as realize it's also, we have to train everyone into this, because if we don't, you're gonna end up that fundamental fight, the same problem with the SMCs. If the SMCs aren't taught this, they go, well, 98 versus 75, I want 98. No, but not in totality. One of them is 75% in 30 minutes, the other's 3 hours from now. And then they go, oh, that makes a lot more sense.
Right.